Broadchurch is an ITV drama that aired in 2013, written by... Oh no. Oh no. Oh no. Shit. Oh god. Why? But it's actually pretty good. The story follows the investigation into a murder of a child in a small town. Now, Broadchurch wouldn't be considered by anyone really as the best drama out there, but as far as ITV dramas go, it definitely stands out. A fairly competent script, but made great through its presentation. The directing, acting and music all help to elevate the material beyond just another British TV drama. Now, if you've never seen Broadchurch, definitely give it a go, at least the first series, but if you have no intention to, then I'll give a quick spoiler warning here because I'm going to go through most of the story. And if you've never seen the American remake of Broadchurch, Gracepoint, then make sure to go wait in the queue along with the rest of humanity.
Gracepoint, all mystery and dark.
Oh, that
and
moody thing.
Yes,
it's all mood
thing.
on that town, that Gracepoint.
Yes.
David Tennant is with us. He's starring in the Fox show Grace.
At the time Gracepoint was being made, I remember hearing of it vaguely. Seeing David Tennant give the interviews and talking about how it had a different ending to Broadchurch made me somewhat interested to watch it, but I've never really had the motivation. I always assumed it was just a standard American detective show loosely based around the main plot of Broadchurch. But holy moly, how I was wrong. American remakes of British shows don't usually go down great, but at least they're sometimes able to offer something different, whether it be tone, different characters, or completely new scripts. Whereas Gracepoint went a different route. Instead, they chose to keep the show, word for word, shot for shot, the exact same, but with the most minor changes you could possibly make. Changes, as you might have guessed, made for the worse. It's taken something perfectly good and tweaked tiny parts of it to make it shit. It's like if someone took the Mona Lisa, copied it exactly, but slightly changed the position of an eye and the mouth. It would look ridiculous. Now, why would I review something that serves absolutely no use in society? Most would say the concept of pointlessness leaves very little room for commentary, but I disagree. Gracepoint and Broadchurch compared is a prime example of how remakes of shows can fail. Now, if you're stupid, you may say,
"But Stan, Gracepoint is its own entity. Why compare it to another show? Why not watch it as is?"
And to that I'd say, yeah, Gracepoint by itself is a painfully boring and average detective drama, but overall pretty inoffensive. But Broadchurch wasn't a hidden gem found in an old film reel in a cave. It's an extremely successful British drama with a bloody 87% fame rating on YouGov. Expectations were already set in place when the remake was announced, and so I don't think a comparison should be off the table. And then when you pair with that, Gracepoint follows Broadchurch almost down to the word, so in my opinion it's pretty much begging you to compare them. But don't worry, I'm not going to compare each episode individually, that would be overkill and pretty tedious. I may do that for mainly episode 1 and 2, and then the last one at the end, maybe? I don't know yet, I haven't finished writing, but I am going to take key aspects that make Broadchurch such a damn sexy show, and then explain where Gracepoint falls short in those same aspects. Hey, before we carry on, it's future Stan here. It's Stan from the future. That's fun, isn't it? But before the example starts, I do want to let you guys know, obviously copyright is a thing. I've tried my best to use examples and clips from the shows, as limited as possible. But for some clips, I may have to obscure the clips a little bit, maybe put some green screen assets in there. Obviously, I'm still going to make sure the overall point of the example I'm showing does get through, in spite of the obstructions. But, just letting you know, they'll be there. So when they come up, please don't be alarmed. Just try and look through them, Just try and look through them. So yeah, without any further ado, I'll throw you back over to past Stan with our first category, which is... Now, Now, the most notable similarity between the two shows is the casting of David Tennant as Detective Emmett Carver.
That's right, yeah.
And uniquely, now we adapt shows here all the time, but we don't adopt the lead in our adaptation.
Yeah.
You get to play in both places.
Yeah.
How is it different?
Well, it's different because there's a whole different cast. So it's that.
According to reputable sources, and definitely not the trivia section from IMDb, the producers of Gracepoint claimed to have auditioned many actors for the role of Emmett Carver and were initially going to go with someone else, but Tennant's audition was just so damn sexy they had to have him. And I don't blame them. David Tennant is a great actor and a stand-up dude, but something tells me he was always going to get the role in Gracepoint. I mean, they had an uphill battle from the start, essentially remaking a beloved British show with a less talented crew, and so including someone from the original would provide a big boost in ratings. And when faced with the question, why did you bring Tennant back, it seems like even Chibnall doesn't have an answer.
Why was it important to preserve at least one of the original cast members when transferring it stateside?
Well, it was just a collision of circumstances that ended up that way. I mean, he would have been on the list anyway, so it just seemed the right decision at the time. And but there's an amazing ensemble out there and lots of new faces, so it'd be really interesting to see how that all comes together.
But to be fair, Tennant doesn't do a bad job, but then again he is essentially doing the same job twice. Although they have slapped on a naughty American accent that I'm telling you now, you never get used to. But also it kind of takes away from his character. In Broadchurch he kept his Scottish accent, whereas most of the other characters spoke with a distinctive West Country accent. Now, how realistic that accent was isn't for me to decide, but the point is Alec Hardy was an outsider. That's his character. He's someone detached from this town, unbiased by familiarity, and it shows in the way he speaks. Whereas Emmett Carter just has a regular American accent like everyone else. Speaking of everyone else, excuse me. So there are two types of actors that make up the cast of Gracepoint. Badly cast actors and bad actors. Anna Gunn, who plays Ellie, great actress. You know, that's clear, that's known. But is she a good fit for Ellie? No! Olivia Colman brought such a friendly, innocent feeling to her character. Emotional but also strong and able to stand up for herself, whereas Gunn's performance is missing this vulnerability. It's not even just down to their performances. What Gracepoint is trying to do is squeeze an entire character into a different actor. The character of Ellie fits with Olivia Colman because Ellie was written with her in mind, even relating to physical attributes as well. Compared to Olivia Colman, Anna Gunn's much taller and has a more defined facial structure, her voice is more reserved and professional sounding, and we've literally seen her involved in a knife fight against fucking Heisenberg. But this is all purely superficial and shouldn't affect how an actor portrays their character, right? Wrong! When a character is written and developed with an actor in mind, every aspect is taken into account. Height, facial features, voice, hair colour, bone structure, age, and then just the public's perception of them as a person. Now, this isn't to say that all these things should be set in stone when auditioning actors, but that's what developing characters to fit actors is for. A character should be built between the writer and actor, not stuffed into someone because they fit the gender and was in Breaking Bad. Next, we have the characters of Beth and Mark Latimer and Beth and Mark Solano. Jesus Christ, probably the worst casting in the entire show. Whenever someone says Jodie Whittaker has no potential to play the Doctor, I always bring up Broadchurch. With a role like Beth, the only question I need to ask is, do I believe her character? Do I believe through her performance that Beth is a heartbroken, damaged mother who wants nothing more than to see her son again? In the case of Broadchurch, I really do. There was never a moment that had me second guessing her as a character, whereas in Gracepoint, I see someone who's acting extremely hard, desperately trying to convince me of her character, but failing to pull it off. But you know what? Actions speak louder than words, and a picture holds 1,000 words, and a video has 10 times more words. What I'm trying to say is, I'm going to show you an example. Now, we're almost 10 minutes in at this point, and if by some miracle you're still here and I'm not just speaking into the abyss, I wanted to make clear, I know some of you probably haven't seen or even can't remember a lot of Broadchurch, which I am keeping in mind, so I will try my best to explain where we are in the story as I go along. Anyways, example time. So this example comes from episode 2 of each show. Danny's family are sitting together watching TV a couple days after his death. First, let's see how Broadchurch handles it. Now, even though the rest of the family is present, Beth is the real focus here. She's restless and irritable, unable to just sit and do nothing. She needs to keep her mind busy and off of her grief.
Where's crisps? Why is there no crisps?
You don't want crisps?
I do.
Where are you going?
Where do you think? Out.
We should clear it with Pete.
I'm going to the shop, that's all.
Well, let me go for you.
I want to go myself.
Give me a list.
Mum, stop smothering me. Sorry.
Now, before we really dive into the nuances in her performance here, let's have a look at how Gracepoint handles this.
Potato chips. Why do we have any potato chips in this house?
You don't want potato chips.
No, I do. I do want potato chips.
Where are you going?
Out. Going.
Oh, you should probably clear it with
Mom,
Pete.
I am going to the supermarket, all right? That is all. I've been going to the supermarket for months.
Well, let me go for you.
No, I want to go by myself.
Well, just give me your...
No, Mom! Wait. Please stop smothering me, all right? Sorry.
Okay, so to a casual viewer, these two scenes may seem almost exactly the same, but there is so much wrong with how Gracepoint handled this. Lots and lots of tiny changes, but all of these changes result in one massive change. And that's how the scene made the viewer feel. Now, I can't begin to imagine the pain felt from losing a child, but we've most likely all felt, to some degree, the emotions Beth is feeling here. Having to force yourself to keep busy so you don't have to succumb to your own thoughts, and in turn lashing out at loved ones or reacting strongly to minor incidences. I feel like Whittaker conveys this perfectly. Whereas when I watched Virginia Cole perform the same scene, I feel nothing. Her over-exaggerated expressions and eye rolls and awkward arm and hand movements make the scene almost laughable. And why they cut this line, I have no idea.
Sorry.
I want to help you.
You can't.
I am going to the supermarket, all right? That is all. I've been going to the supermarket for months.
Now, I don't want to sit here and shit on these actors, you know? It's not easy to try and portray emotions and lines that have already been portrayed better before.
Let him talk.
I just...
Let him talk.
But there was still room left to understand the role you're playing and make it more of your own. Every actor here should have understood their character as it was written on the page, not try to emulate a performance by someone else. But anyway, now on to Mark. So Mark in Broadchurch is played by Andrew Buchan, I don't know. Not too well known, but he's probably my favourite actor to watch in the entire show. Throughout Broadchurch, there are so many instances of Mark hiding elements of the truth or needing to hide his own emotions, and it's this layered acting Andrew's able to do so well. The scene where he goes to see his son's body is honestly heartbreaking, as he's stopped by a friend on his way in but can't let him know about the murder.
Mark! All right, buddy.
All right, Trev.
What are you in here for? Nothing serious, I hope? No. Sign this petition, will you? They're threatening to close this place down.
In a bit of a rush, mate.
Oh, well, come on. Won't take 2 seconds. It's important. Hey. Ah, good man. Hey, coming to Skittles? Line, Tuesday? Yeah, Minster. Grudge match.
See how it's going, see?
Right. Give enough to Beth and the kids.
Now let's move on to Gracepoint Mark, played by Michael Pena. Yeah, you heard me. Michael Pena. From Chips.
Everyone's eating everyone's ass now.
Now, he's not terrible in this. You know, he serves the purpose. He cries a lot. Water comes out of his eyes. Jolly good stuff. But it's just bad casting. You know, I don't think I need to explain why. I think we're all on board here. It's bad casting. Why are you here, Michael? Now, the rest of the cast aren't really that notable. They're just kind of weak diet versions of the Broadchurch cast, but with American accents. Like, look at them. It seems like most of them were just hired off of having a likeness to the original. And wait, is that Nick Nolte? So I haven't spoken much on what makes the story of Broadchurch so great. Now there's been plenty of murder mysteries before this and plenty after, but what made Broadchurch stand out is its ability to build the world this murder takes place in. Allowing the viewer to connect more with the characters and the town they all live in brings up the stakes. It makes the viewer more aware of how these events will affect the characters themselves. And how are these character relationships developed? Well, mainly through the dialogue. Now, seeing as what Chibnall's given us after Broadchurch, I am surprised at how solid the dialogue is. It's realistic, and honestly, that's something that's difficult to accomplish when dealing with such intense subject matters. I've got to give my hats off to old Chibbles on this one. You know, he didn't do a bad job. You know? Now, it should be noted that Chibnall didn't actually write every episode of Broadchurch and Gracepoint. However, he is the executive producer on them both. But the episodes he has written for Broadchurch are still well written. Now on to Gracepoint. So in most instances, it would appear the scripts for both Broadchurch and Gracepoint are the exact same. But that's what makes the instances when it's not so damn jarring. At first glance, these changes are so minute that what I'm about to talk about may seem like the nittiest of nitpicking. But to me, it's really just a showcase of the new writers or the studio or whoever it was just not understanding the material.
Example time. Ooh.
So, episode 1 of each show. Beth has just arrived at a sports day for Danny's school. No one has seen him all morning, but they just assumed he left early in the morning for his paper round with William Hartnell and just didn't say bye to them, when in fact he was murdered by the night prior. Beth is sitting on a bench when a teacher approaches her and says,
"No, Danny?"
To which Beth replies,
"Oh, I thought he was here."
Okay, yeah, pretty straightforward. Beth is told about her son being absent and she's confused. Very basic, we're at worm level writing right now. Okay, surely Gracepoint couldn't have fucked this up, he says forebodingly.
Hey, is Danny okay? What do you mean? He didn't come in this morning. Yeah, he did.
What do you mean he's not at school? I haven't seen him since I've been here all 14 hours prior, but he has to be here.
It's part of his daily schedule.
No, we haven't seen him today. I figured he was home sick.
Now, yeah, okay, obviously not a big change, but no one speaks like this. This sort of dialogue shatters that realism that was so prevalent in Broadchurch, and shattering that realism will distance the viewers from these characters, and in turn, the whole show. Example 2, I'll do a couple examples for you. So, episode 2 of each show, starting with Gracepoint. Emmett Carver and Ellie are talking about the case, and halfway through a conversation, Emmett says,
How's the house to house?
What?
How's the house to house?
This is literally gibberish.
How's the house to house?
You're making up words. Now, I watched this with no subtitles and with no understanding of what the line was originally in Broadchurch, which made me very confused. So I then switched to Broadchurch and watched the same scene. I was thinking, you know, maybe the line is the same in both shows, but Tennant's American accent made it hard to understand in Gracepoint. I don't fucking know. And then in the same scene in Broadchurch, Alec Hardy says this.
How are we doing on the house to house?
Okay, yeah. How we doing on the house to house? Makes perfect sense. Let's look at the subtitles for what Gracepoint changed that line to.
Get the footage. How's the house to house?
How's the house to house? What? Why would you do this? Seriously, this took valuable time and brain power that could have been directed towards something with the smallest essence of point and meaning. This serves nothing but confusion. Then later on in the same episode, Ellie says a line that is in Gracepoint but isn't in Broadchurch that makes me want to rip my fucking dick off.
We found this in the daughter's room, under a floorboard. Here we go.
Bloody hell.
Here we go.
So, like I said, these changes, they're small, almost unnoticeable, unless you've wasted valuable time analysing them like me. But they are important. Realistic dialogue is no small feat, and it makes the viewer more invested, even if on a purely subconscious level. But when the dialogue is either altered or said with a different level of emphasis, it can break the illusion of realism. And no offence, but this isn't really a situation where the acting is able to hold the writing up. I mean, take the scene where Mark goes to see Danny's body. Now, in my opinion, Michael's performance is absolutely fine here, you know? No real big problems. And to be fair, with the right script, it could have been just as effective as the scene in Broadchurch, but what brings it down really is the script. So Broadchurch Mark enters the room and immediately says,
All this way I thought it wouldn't be him.
This gives us an insight into his mental state. Even with all the evidence, his attachment to his son is too strong to completely diminish all sense of denial. As he gets closer to his son, we hear him say,
My Danny.
Now, Mark will refer to him a lot in this scene as my Danny or my boy. This shows again where Mark's head is. He's only focusing on him and his son right now. Before, he was acting strong for his family, making sure they were alright, but in these moments, he's solely focused on his attachment to his son. Then, straight after this line, he follows it with,
Can I touch him, Al?
Now, these 3 lines alone shows a clear progression in the scene. He starts by reflecting on his initial doubt.
All this way I thought it wouldn't be him.
Then turning his focus to his son,
My Danny.
which in turn urges him to ask permission for a closer connection.
Can I touch him, Al?
So what's the first line in Gracepoint?
Can I touch him?
So we've already skipped a whole entire progression of Mark's mental state. So back to Broadchurch, Mark then begins to ask why. How could this have happened? Clearly wanting more than anything to just turn back time and get his son back.
He's only little, isn't he? It's just my little boy, isn't he?
Then, after some hesitation, Mark then starts speaking directly to his son.
Listen, boy.
It takes him a while to get to this point because it's a big step for his character to finally speak directly to his son and air out his guilt and sadness. Whereas Michael Penis just starts talking to him straight away, like a fucking psychopath.
Hello. I'm sorry that I wasn't there to protect you. I'm never gonna forgive myself. Or that I catch whoever did this.
Believe me, brother, an eye for an eye, okay? We will catch the son of a bitch that did this to you.
Broadchurch Mark then has a slow and emotional conversation to his son about how he's sorry he let him down and that he loves him.
I'm sorry that I wasn't there for you. You're my boy, Danny, and I let you down. And I'm so sorry. I love you, Zillion superstar. I always will.
Whereas Grace Bitch Mark sounds like he's confessing his love to his roommate.
I love you, Danny. I love you.
Even small things like Mark calling Ellie Elle makes the overall scene feel more personable, which Gracepoint has none of.
I prefer Ellie.
Just Ellie.
Ellie. Ellie. Ellie. Ellie.
Yeah.
No.
Now, am I being biased here? You know, I don't know, maybe. I don't really care. The issue here isn't that the show is too different to Broadchurch, it's the complete opposite. It's way too similar. Either change it completely or keep every minute detail the exact same, otherwise it won't work. But the next subject I'm going to cover is probably the most important. If there's one thing that made Broadchurch so great, it was the overall something that wasn't carried over to Gracepoint. Now, as good as Chibnall's writing is in Broadchurch, I think even he'd admit that the directing, acting and music do make him look better. Oh wait, he literally did.
The quality and depth of our acting ensemble is it's a gift to any writer, so they all make me look better because they're so fantastic.
So the first subsection of this section that we're currently on now is the editing. So the editing in Broadchurch wasn't at all flashy and didn't exactly make itself stand out, but I don't think it needed to. The cast were doing a great job of telling this story, so just as long as we saw their performances, I'd say the editing did its job. So what's wrong with the editing in Gracepoint? Good question. Everything. Fucking truck version. First off, I don't think there's ever a moment in Broadchurch with noticeably bad editing or janky cuts, but there are several instances of this in Gracepoint.
Okay, but you're...
Miller.
Yes?
Also, the pacing is a large issue in Gracepoint. So many times it seems like the show's just trying to rush forward to the next scene, not caring if they have to sacrifice all emotion in the scene just to get there. Wait, do you smell that? Smells like an example. So episode 1 from the show, Ellie just went to the Latimer household to give them their family liaisons officer. Now, there are many things wrong with this scene, even disregarding the editing later on. Firstly, the scene really showcases the difference between Anna Gunn and Olivia Colman. You really get the sense Colman is playing a family friend who just happens to be a detective working the case that involves them, whereas Gunn seems more like a very empathetic detective. You don't get the connection between the Solanos and Gunn's Ellie like you do with the Latimers and Coleman's Ellie.
Until we have the person responsible in custody, Danny's... his body is... God, sorry, I have to talk about it like this. It's the most valuable piece of evidence we have.
And Danny's... his body, it's... Look, I'm sorry to talk this way, but it's the most valuable piece of evidence we have.
Also, the acting in this scene is just bad from everyone except Anna Gunn.
He's not just evidence, he's my brother.
And how about the funeral? Can we at least start planning that?
Give her the paper.
Give her the paper.
And the best thing that I can do for you now is to find out who killed Danny, okay?
What? Are you against this idea now?
We're gonna catch whoever did this.
So switching to Broadchurch for a sec, later on in the scene, Beth tells Mark to give Ellie a list of the people they think could have possibly killed Danny. Ellie reads it and says,
These are all your friends. I know.
Yes, Miller?
Excuse me.
see the pause they gave? This is a huge pivotal moment in the series. We as the audience have just learned what the stakes are. Danny's murderer could now be any one of the people we've been introduced to. The scene is given time to breathe. All the characters as well as the audience are given time to soak up this information. Now, Gracepoint follows this scene almost down to a T, but note how much time they give between after the note is read to the end of the scene.
These people are all your friends.
We know.
Detective Miller? Excuse me.
Yes.
Have a minute.
Literally, straight away. This show gives no one the time to soak up information, no time to breathe, skipping forward to each scene, which is actually quite ironic considering how boring it is. Also, what's up with the music? It sounds like a washing machine. So that's just one of the examples of bad pacing in the show, but I want to move on to something else regarding the presentation, the directing. Remember when I said the acting was bad? Well, the directing doesn't really help. In episode 1 of Broadchurch, when the Latimers are told the body they found on the beach was Danny, they react like this.
Was it him?
Hey.
Very realistic and believable in my opinion. They convey the emotions in a way that transfers to the viewer. Now let's watch the same performance done by the Gracepoint lot.
Dad.
It's all right.
Yeah, not as good. Not as good. Now, the acting definitely holds part of the blame here, but I also blame the way it was shot. Having a single wide fixed onto the family makes me feel like I'm watching some weird performance art. We don't get the variety from Broadchurch, allowing the viewer to focus on them individually rather than a sofa full of actors acting so freaking hard. But in my opinion, the most amateurish rendition of any scene from Broadchurch is actually one of the very first scenes. So on the morning of Danny's death, his body still hasn't been discovered, or at least the town isn't aware of it yet. The scene follows Mark as he walks through the town on his way to work, presented to us in one take that lasts around a minute and a half. It's the perfect opportunity to introduce us to almost every major character as we see Mark interact with everyone that will reveal their importance later on, following Danny's death. A scene like this needs to feel natural, like this is just part of Mark's daily routine, which is hard to achieve, especially when the purpose is so obvious. Most people watching this would recognise the scene as a montage of introductions, and yet it still finds a way to feel natural. Now, of course, the directing isn't the only aspect to play here. You know, the acting needs to feel fluid, every actor needs to hit their mark perfectly, and the dialogue needs to feel seamless and well paced. But the directing does play a huge role here. The fluidity of the camera work and the placement of actors, where they're going, how they interact with Mark in a way that's believable, all this helps sell the feeling of naturalness to the scene. Although it's a good thing that Mark didn't pass a butcher's shop on his walk, or we would have seen Gracepoint butchering the whole scene. The potholes I was saying Broadchurch needed to avoid to make this scene feel natural are the very ones Gracepoint falls down. Most interactions between Mark and the other characters either starts awkwardly or ends awkwardly, and every line of dialogue that comes out of his mouth is as natural as Mickey Rourke's face. In Broadchurch, we see characters Mark interacts with clearly on their way somewhere, even after he's finished talking to them. Whereas it seems in Gracepoint, characters just cease to exist as soon as they've finished conversing with Mark.
5-2, we'll save your prayers, huh? So when am I getting that free dinner?
So one of the interactions in this scene is Mark simply saying sorry to Susan Wright, a character who will become important later. Now, as simple as this interaction is, it's probably one of the most difficult to get right. The reason for this is Mark doesn't know this woman, whereas most of the interactions in this scene are with people he's familiar with. So how do you subtly show the viewer this woman without being glaringly obvious we're being showed her because she'll come back later on? Well, Broadchurch does this perfectly.
Right, Jan. Sorry. Where were you for five-a-side last Tuesday, eh?
The way she pops up on screen in front of Mark and the way he squeezes past her feels natural enough, whilst also subtly telling the audience to remember this character. Whereas Gracepoint tries to do this, but fails embarrassingly. The same tactic is used, having Mark divert his course slightly to get round her, but instead they show her eerily walking towards the camera for a while, clearly in the view of Mark. So as the viewer, we've already had a lot of time to see her, as well as Mark. Then, for absolutely no reason, Mark drops a Rick level "Excuse me."
Excuse me?
It's a massive road, just walk around her. What are you talking about? But anyways, moving on. So the last aspect of the presentation I want to discuss is the soundtrack. So the soundtrack of Broadchurch was composed by Oliver Arnolds. Apologies for the mispronunciation. And it is by far my favourite aspect of the entire show. Slow-paced scenes of characters looking into the distance are made rewatchable and engaging just by virtue of the music. I've literally been withholding myself from talking about the soundtrack in every example I've brought up. Almost every piece presents a dark and eerie tone, but with a degree of subtlety that means it will work with almost any scene. Is it sometimes overused? You know, maybe, but I never felt it took anything away from the scene. Now, I won't talk about this for long because there are only so many ways I can say the music in Broadchurch is good and the music in Gracepoint is meh. But I can comment on the way both shows use it. Now, where I did mention Broadchurch can sometimes overuse its music, I've never had an issue when watching because I just love the way each piece sounds. Although the Broadchurch music was never overbearing like with Gracepoint. Where Broadchurch would use a subtler, more atmospheric piece in the background, Gracepoint would sometimes completely miss the mark and play something loud and distracting, which is even more prevalent when the soundtrack feels like a cheap imitation of the original. I mean, look at the scene I just talked about.
Thanks for asking. Well, pass on my low, won't you? Yeah, I will do, mate, absolutely.
The music used in that scene for Broadchurch is so contrasting with the cheerful walking and talking of the actors.
For you there, mate?
A week late.
Oh, sorry, no one's perfect, eh?
Monday morning for it.
Has a sense of eeriness and creepiness to it. The rhythm emulating a ticking time bomb just waiting for the town to find out about the murder. Whereas Gracepoint, it doesn't... It doesn't feel... It just doesn't hit the same, you know? It's not as good. So this brings me to the final topic I want to cover. Now, you might have noticed I'm only really focusing on the first 2 episodes of each show, but now I want to jump forward a bit, to the end, and the reveal of the murderer of Danny Latimer. So, when I began watching Gracepoint, I didn't know much about it. All I was sure on was the casting of David Tennant in the same role, and that it would have a different ending to Broadchurch. And it turns out I was 3/4 right. David Tennant was cast, and it does have a different ending. Kind of. So here I'm going to spoil the ending of Broadchurch, so if you haven't seen it, this is your final warning, you know? Go watch it, then come back, finish this video. Or don't, you know, it's your life, I don't mind. So after 7 episodes of red herrings and blue balls and green beans, we finally get the reveal. After Danny's phone that was established earlier in the series comes back online, Hardy goes in search, tracking it on his trusty Nokia.
Yeah, just pull up here. Stay here, alright? I'll call you.
After a long and intense scene following Hardy as he tracks the phone, he then enters a shed. Belonging to Joe Miller, the husband of Ellie Miller.
I'm sick of hiding.
Now, I have heard some people say that they saw this twist coming, but I feel it was executed pretty well. The show does a great job of keeping Joe in the background, never playing too large of a role in the investigation, until towards the very end. You might be surprised at how many subtle hints we get throughout the series though. It's shown in later seasons that Joe's sense of morality is definitely warped. I mean, like, you know, he killed a kid, you know? But some of his guilt does still seep through if you pay attention. Like, when he's asking Ellie if she knows what happened yet.
Do you know what happened? Should we be worried for other kids?
Don't know yet. I'll go up and tell him in a minute.
How's the new boss?
That lingering shot on his face is only really clear after you know the reveal. It's like the show's teasing the unsuspecting viewer, presenting the killer to you literally in episode 1. But I'm sure you're all dying to know the tasty old twist in Gracepoint. I mean, who did it? You know, was it Tennant? Does his brooding intensity actually come from some dark, murderous obsession? Or was it Michael Peñas? Does his overwhelming guilt from neglecting his son actually stem from the regret he faces for killing him? Was it Anna Gunn, the very woman working the case? Was it Beth Latin Solano in her Crocodile Tears? Was it Nick Nolte, Smokey Woman, Smokey Woman's dog, the neo-Nazi from Breaking Bad, Nick Nolte? No, it was Joe Miller. It's the same. It's Joe Miller, Ellie Miller's husband. Yeah.
I'll tell you everything.
It's the same. It's just the same as Broadchurch. Now, the show does give us an extra twist later on in the episode, but at this point, my disappointment was reaching levels I never thought it could. And the reason for this is, I was looking for all the same signs that Joe did it, that appeared in Broadchurch, but they just weren't there. It was a bait and switch, but the most manipulative kind. See if you can spot the same nuances in the performances that we got from Broadchurch, Joe.
He doesn't know, does he?
Not yet. I kept him away from it all. You know what happened? Should we be worried for other kids?
I don't know.
They're not there at all. The show up to this point has followed the exact same storyline as Broadchurch, which brings up the question, who is this show for? Because the only sensible answer I can come up with is the people who've never seen Broadchurch. The demographic who lives in America who doesn't have access to ITV. They're the only people I can imagine watching this show without feeling angry and cheated. I mean, they might feel bored, but that's at least better, you know? But then why the whole song and dance? Why hide the fact that you're just making an exact copy of a show that already exists? Unless your intention is to hopefully trick the UK audience into watching a show they've already watched. Because so far it seems that only reviews I can find is from people angry at how similar it is to Broadchurch. Speaking of Broadchurch, so Hardy begins speaking to Joe Miller in custody, where we get a nice flashback of the murder. It turns out Joe had been meeting Danny at a beach house for many weeks. They'd hang out and talk and hold each other. It's pretty fucking weird, I'm not gonna lie. But Danny's had enough and decides he wants to leave. Him and Joe have a little tussle and Joe ends up killing him.
Dad?
So switching to Gracepoint, how is this part different? Well, it's not. It's still the same.
I have to tell them.
You don't. You can't. Danny?
It was an accident.
But later on in the episode, it seems that Tom, Ellie and Joe's son, is keeping a secret. Now, throughout Broadchurch, Tom was acting quite suspiciously, but it just turns out he felt guilty for the death of Danny, because they had a falling out around a week prior. But Gracepoint takes this idea and runs with it. Ellie wheedles the secret out of him, and this is the new flashback we see.
Danny! No one has to know about this. Not Tom, not your parents.
I have to tell them.
You can't.
What are you doing to him? What are you doing? Stop! Leave him dead! Stop! He's my friend!
Stop!
Fucking brilliant. So it turns out Tom actually killed Danny by having the most lethal backswing of any 12-year-old. Now, this addition to the story was obviously the biggest change between Gracepoint and Broadchurch. But what's the point? Where's the motivation? I'll tell you, there isn't one. This is so obviously a change made just to be different, just so that they have some sort of selling tactic and that when they claim that the script isn't the exact same, they can be technically telling the truth. They do try and make this change have some sort of impact on the story. They try and make it so that the story kind of ends ambiguously, but I mean, not really. Now, this ending's pretty confusing, I'm not gonna lie, so I'll try my best to describe it. So basically, after the conversation Ellie has with Tom, she decides that no one needs to know about it. I mean, they've got Joe in custody, he was doing weird stuff to Danny anyway, just let him take the rap, you know? But then later on, Emmett has some sort of inclination, he has some flashbacks that make him think Tom's now another suspect for some reason. Literally, this is spurred on by almost nothing, but just to give us a cliffhanger. He calls Ellie, and then Ellie also has an inclination that Emmett knows something for some reason, even though there's no explanation for that. She doesn't reply, Emmett walks off looking suspicious, and then it ends. But that's brilliant, you know, make us sit through 10 episodes of a show we've already watched, and then don't give us a satisfying conclusion. Thank you, Gracepoint. And that's it. That's the end of Gracepoint, you know? Now, throughout my journey making this review, and it really did feel like a journey. Not a good one, mind you. More like a, you know, walking down the street to buy some eggs. But I found myself constantly trying to find a motive, any sense of meaning. A point, if you will. But the only point I can muster from a truly pointless show is just don't watch it. All Gracepoint succeeds in is highlighting the strengths of a different show. The presentation, the performances, the music of Broadchurch is truly inimitable. Is truly inimitable. And Gracepoint proves this.
All right, Gracepoint airs Thursday night, 9 o'clock on Fox. Catch it, binge watch it, catch up to Gracepoint.
Yeah,
it is a different kind of series.
Yeah.